The small town of Black Hollow sat at the edge of a vast and desolate forest, surrounded by towering trees that seemed to have a life of their own. Its streets were empty, the buildings were old and crumbling, and a thick fog always seemed to linger, as if the town itself was hiding some dark secret. It was the kind of place that one would drive through without a second thought. But for Sarah, the quiet solitude was exactly what she needed. She had been on the road for hours, escaping the bustle of city life, when she stumbled upon this forgotten town. Sarah wasn't sure why she had stopped. The eerie emptiness called to her in some strange way. Perhaps it was fate. After all, she had no place to be, no one to meet, just a deep, gnawing need to be alone. As she drove into the town, she noticed the only sign of life, a small, run-down inn nestled between two derelict buildings. The faint glow of an old neon sign above the door flickered intermittently, casting an odd, almost ghostly light on the street. She parked her car in front of the inn and made her way to the entrance. The door creaked as she pushed it open, revealing a dimly lit lobby. Behind the counter stood an elderly man with a weathered face and piercing eyes. His name was Mr. Clark, and there was something unnervingly watchful about him. He greeted Sarah with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Welcome to Black Hollow, miss," he said, his voice soft, but carrying an odd sense of foreboding. "Not many visitors come through here, especially this late." "I'm just passing through," Sarah replied, trying to ignore the unease creeping up her spine. "I'll just stay for the night." He handed her a rusted key with a number tag on it. "Room 5, he said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "But be careful. The town isn't what it seems. Stay inside after dark and don't venture into the woods." Sarah took the key, giving him a confused look. "I'll be fine." Mr. Clark didn't answer, merely nodding and watching her as she ascended the stairs to her room. The inn was quiet, the kind of quiet that felt oppressive, like the air itself was holding its breath. Sarah lay in bed, staring up at the peeling wallpaper, her mind racing with the events of the day. The warnings from Mr. Clark lingered in her mind, but she dismissed them as nothing more than the ramblings of an old man. Outside, the wind howled against the building, rattling the windows. The low hum of the storm added to the sense of unease that had settled over Sarah. She pulled the blanket tightly around herself and closed her eyes, trying to shut out the sounds of the night. But it didn't work. She couldn't ignore the whispers. At first, they were faint, barely audible. A murmur that could have been the wind or the creaking of the old building. But as the minutes passed, the whispers grew louder, more distinct. Sarah's heart began to race as she sat up in bed, straining to listen. "Who's there?" she whispered, her voice trembling. There was no answer, but the whispers continued. They seemed to come from all around her, from the shadows in the corners of the room, from the darkness beyond the window. She rose from the bed and went to the window, pushing it open to let in the cold night air. The fog outside rolled through the town like a living thing, twisting and shifting, hiding something just beyond her sight. The whispers grew frantic, as if something was trying to get her attention. A chill ran down her spine as she turned to face the room. The shadows along the walls seemed to stretch and writhe, taking on shapes that weren't quite human. She backed away slowly, her breath quickening. No, this isn't real," she muttered to herself. But the whispers grew louder still, and then she saw it. A figure emerged from the corner of the room, pale and gaunt, its eyes hollow and empty. It was like something out of a nightmare. An apparition, a shadow given form. The thing stared at her, its mouth hanging open as if trying to speak, but no sound came out. Sarah's pulse raced as she stumbled backward. "What do you want?" she gasped. The figure did not respond. It only moved closer, its shadowy form growing larger as it stepped into the dim light of the room. In a blind panic, Sarah ran out of the room and down the stairs, her heart pounding in her chest. She flung open the front door and ran into the night, but the forest that lay beyond the town seemed to call to her, beckoning her deeper into the darkness. Sarah didn't know what had possessed her to enter the forest. The fog had thickened, and the trees seemed to loom above her like twisted, gnarled hands reaching out to grab her. The whispers were still there, faint at first, but growing louder with every step she took. The path was narrow, barely visible through the mist, but she walked on, driven by some unknown force, as if the forest itself was pulling her deeper into its grasp. She stumbled through the underbrush, her footsteps muffled by the thick carpet of fallen leaves. Then suddenly the air grew cold, and a figure appeared in front of her. It was a man, pale, disheveled, and covered in moss. His eyes were wide with terror, his mouth open in a silent scream. He reached out to her, but before Sarah could react, the figure vanished, leaving only the eerie sound of the wind rustling through the trees. But Sarah wasn't alone. She felt a presence behind her, a shadow that followed her every move. The whispers were louder now, almost deafening, as if the very forest itself was speaking to her. She turned to face the direction she had come from, but there was nothing there. Just the darkness, the fog, and the endless whispering. The next morning, Sarah returned to the inn, shaken and exhausted. She didn't know what she had seen in the forest, or if it had even been real. But one thing was certain. The town held secrets, dark secrets, and she was no longer certain she was safe. As she walked into the lobby, Mr. Clark was waiting for her, his eyes filled with a mixture of pity and sorrow. He knew what he had always known. "I told you not to go into the woods," he said, his voice grave. "Once you've heard the whispers, once you've seen the shadows, it's too late." Sarah's heart sank. "What do you mean? What's happening here?" Mr. Clark's face hardened. The town was built on blood, on a pact made long ago. The forest is cursed, and so is this town. The shadows, they don't just watch, they feed. And once they've chosen you, they never let you go. Well, that night, Sarah knew the whispers would return. She could feel them, tugging at her, pulling her toward the darkness. She couldn't escape. She could never escape. The inn's walls trembled as the shadows in the corners grew taller, reaching out for her. The whispers were deafening now, an overwhelming chorus of voices calling her name. And then she heard it, a sound that froze her blood. The footsteps of someone or something moving in the shadows. She turned to run, but it was too late. The darkness enveloped her, swallowing her whole as the whispers became screams. The shadows had claimed her. It was a cold and misty morning when Emily received the letter. She was alone at her apartment, sipping coffee and scrolling through her phone when the sound of a letter being slid through the door caught her attention. There was no name on the envelope, just a strange, elegant script for Emily. Curious, she opened it carefully. The message inside was simple yet unnerving. Come to the old house on Maple Street. The mirror will show you what you need to see. A friend. Emily frowned. She had no idea who could have sent it. She didn't know anyone on Maple Street, let alone anyone who would send a cryptic letter. The thought of ignoring it crossed her mind, but something about the letter drew her in. She had always been fascinated by things that were just out of reach, things that made her feel unsettled. The curiosity gnawed at her all day. By the evening, she had made up her mind. She was going. The house on Maple Street stood at the end of a narrow road, surrounded by overgrown trees and an unsettling silence. The windows were dark, the door slightly ajar, as if it had been waiting for someone. Emily stepped forward, the gravel crunching beneath her feet. She pushed the door open and entered. The house smelled of dust and decay, and the air felt thick with neglect. Every floorboard creaked under her weight, echoing through the vast emptiness. As she walked through the halls, she could feel an odd sensation in the pit of her stomach, an inexplicable pull, urging her to go deeper. She reached the back of the house and found herself in a dimly lit room. In the center of the room stood an antique mirror, its frame ornate and gilded, reflecting the shadows in a way that felt unnatural. Something about the mirror seemed to beckon her. Emily approached cautiously, her reflection staring back at her from the surface. But as she got closer, she noticed something strange. Her reflection was not in sync with her movements. It seemed slower, as if it was watching her with a mind of its own. As Emily gazed into the mirror, she felt a chill sweep across her body. The room seemed to grow colder, the shadows darker. Her reflection smiled at her, but she hadn't smiled. Her heart skipped a beat, and she stumbled back, horrified. "No, this can't be happening," she whispered, stepping away from the mirror. Her reflection continued to stare back at her, unmoving, as if mocking her fear. She turned to leave, but the door behind her slammed shut. The sound echoed through the house, and the temperature dropped drastically. Panic began to set in as Emily realized she was trapped. Her breaths came in shallow gasps as she turned back to the mirror, only to find her reflection was gone. Instead, the mirror now showed an image of a dark hallway. The image seemed real, like a place she had never seen before, yet it called to her. She hesitated for only a moment before stepping forward. The hallway from the mirror was now before her, dark and winding. She wasn't sure how the mirror had done it, but it had opened a door to this new space. Her legs felt heavy as she walked into the corridor, the floorboards groaning beneath her. She reached the end of the hall, and there was another door. This one old, rusted, and barely hanging on its hinges. A low sound echoed from within. It was almost like whispering, but not quite. Emily pushed the door open, her heart pounding in her chest. Inside, the room was filled with old furniture covered in dusty sheets, forgotten relics of a past life. In the center of the room was another mirror, this one larger, its surface fogged and smudged, as if someone had been touching it recently. The whispers grew louder. Suddenly, the mirror cleared, revealing a young woman. It was Emily, but the woman in the mirror wasn't her. Her reflection smiled at her with an eerie, knowing look. "You shouldn't have come," the woman in the mirror whispered. Emily stumbled back, her breath catching in her throat. She turned around to leave, but the door slammed shut, trapping her once again. She was no longer in control. The mirror seemed to have a life of its own, pulling her in, suffocating her. The reflection in the second mirror began to speak again. its voice distorted and hollow. "You have always been here." Emily's mind raced as the truth began to piece itself together. The woman in the mirror was not someone from her past. She was a reflection of her own fear, her own dark desires and hidden secrets. A version of herself that she had never wanted to confront. As she stood frozen in fear, the mirror's surface rippled like water, and Emily felt herself drawn into it. She reached out with trembling hands, but as she did, her reflection reached back. She was pulled toward the mirror, her body colliding with the cold glass. Suddenly, everything went dark. When Emily woke, she was no longer in the room with the mirror. She was standing in front of it. The room was empty, and the air felt thick with an oppressive silence. Her reflection stood in the mirror, but it was no longer her own. The reflection now wore a sinister smile, one that sent chills down her spine. The reflection in the mirror spoke again, but this time, it wasn't her voice. "I've been waiting for you," it said, its voice echoing around the room. The room around Emily began to shift, distorting as though it were being pulled into the mirror. She tried to scream, but no sound came out. The reflection reached out of the mirror, its hand closing around her throat. Emily gasped for air, her body freezing as she was dragged into the glass, becoming a prisoner of the very reflection she had once feared. And as the mirror returned to stillness, the only thing left in the room was the reflection of the house, now forever trapped within. The coastal town of Black Rock stood on the edge of the world, where the ocean met the jagged cliffs and the wind whispered forgotten secrets. The town was small, isolated, and often lost beneath a thick, persistent fog. Few ventured to Black Rock, and even fewer stayed. The townspeople were a quiet bunch, their lives woven together by the past, by a curse that had haunted the place for generations. Detective Lucas Gray had been to places like this before. Towns where the air was thick with secrets, where old rumors clung to the walls of homes like dust. But there was something different about Black Rock, something unsettling. It had been a typical Thursday evening when the call came in. A drowning. Nothing unusual at first. The ocean claimed lives every year, especially in these parts. But Evelyn Parker wasn't just any victim. A local historian and one of the few people in Black Rock who was still trying to uncover the town's murky past. Evelyn had been found washed up on the shore, her body bruised and twisted. The water had taken her, but there was something in her expression, a look of pure terror that made Lucas pause. There was more to this than just the sea. The report mentioned something strange, a symbol carved into her wrist, an odd mark that seemed familiar. Lucas had seen it before. It was the same symbol he had seen while investigating the abandoned lighthouse on the cliffs, a symbol that had been linked to the town's darkest days. As the rain poured outside his office, Lucas opened the file on Evelyn. The words danced in his mind, but something was gnawing at him. He couldn't shake the feeling that this was no ordinary drowning. The town's shadowy history was calling him again. The following day, Lucas drove to the lighthouse, the wind howling through the trees as he made his way down the winding coastal road. The lighthouse had been abandoned for years, its light no longer shining over the waves to guide the ships that still passed by. The building was a relic of a past that no one wanted to remember, a time when the lighthouse had stood as a symbol of hope. And now, it was a monument to something much darker. As he reached the lighthouse, Lucas felt a strange pull in his chest. The place was silent, eerie, and he could almost hear the whispers of the past, creeping through the cracks in the walls. The door creaked as he pushed it open, stepping inside. Dust hung thick in the air, and the wooden floors groaned beneath his weight. He moved through the building slowly, the only sound a faint echo of his footsteps. The lighthouse towered over him, and he knew that if he were to solve the mystery of Evelyn's death, he had to understand this place. The symbol, the curse, and the truth that the town had long tried to forget. At the top of the spiral staircase, Lucas found the broken beacon. The giant lens that had once illuminated the sea was gone, replaced by emptiness. But there, in the far corner of the room, he saw something. Or someone. A shadowy figure stood in the dim light, its form flickering like a flame caught in the wind. As Lucas approached, the figure turned to face him. The woman's face was pale, her features gaunt and hollow, and her eyes were wide with terror. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered, her voice carrying a strange, echoing quality. "It's not safe. You've come too close." The words seemed to chill the air around him, and before he could react, the figure vanished into thin air, leaving nothing but the stench of salt water in the room. Lucas left the lighthouse in a daze. His mind raced with questions. The woman in the lighthouse, who was she? Why had she appeared to him? And what did she mean by too close? He spent the rest of the day talking to the few remaining residents of Blackrock. He visited Henry Shaw, the town's oldest resident and one of the few people left who might have known the history of the lighthouse. Henry's cottage was old and overgrown, as if nature had long since reclaimed the space. The door creaked open when Lucas knocked, and Henry's frail, shaking hands led him inside. "Ah, Lucas," Henry rasped, his voice barely above a whisper. "I knew you'd come eventually." Lucas sat down across from him, feeling the weight of the moment settle over him. Henry had lived through the dark days of Blackrock's past, the days when the lighthouse had been active and when the curse had first taken root. "The symbol you saw on Evelyn? It's the same symbol that marks those who are chosen," Henry said, his voice trembling. "Chosen by the Watchers from beneath the sea." Henry explained the legend of the lighthouse, a tale of betrayal, blood, and an ancient pact. Long ago, the lighthouse had been built to guide ships safely to port, but it had been built on a foundation of sacrifice. The town's ancestors had made a deal with the creatures that lived beneath the sea, beings that called to the sailors, claiming their lives in exchange for power. But the deal had gone wrong, and the curse had taken root. Now, the Watchers waited, and anyone who uncovered the truth would become their next victim. "It's too late to stop it," Henry said, his eyes filled with sorrow. "Once they come for you, there's no escape." Lucas couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. He pored over the old documents and journals Henry had given him, each one filled with cryptic notes and drawings of the symbol, the same symbol that had appeared on Evelyn's wrist. He found records of rituals conducted in the lighthouse, rituals that were supposed to bind the Watchers and prevent them from taking the town. But the rituals had failed. The Watchers had broken free, and the curse had been passed down through the generations. The final ritual was the most chilling. To break the curse, one must give their soul to the depths, offering themselves to the Watchers, or the curse will claim everything. Lucas' heart raced as he pieced together the last of the puzzle. Evelyn hadn't been killed by the sea. She had been trying to stop the curse, trying to offer herself to the Watchers to end the cycle. But it had claimed her instead, and now it was coming for him. That night, Lucas stood at the base of the lighthouse once more, the storm raging around him. The fog was thick, the air heavy with tension. The ocean crashed violently against the cliffs, as if the sea itself was angry. And then he heard it, a low, guttural sound rising from the depths of the ocean. The watchers were calling. Lucas knew what he had to do. He had uncovered the truth, and now he had to end it. He climbed the steps of the lighthouse, his heart pounding in his chest, and he reached the top. But the wind howled around him, and the shadows seemed to shift as if alive. As the clock struck midnight, Lucas spoke the ancient words of the ritual, offering himself to the sea. The watchers answered. Their enormous forms rose from the depths, their glowing eyes locking onto his. And as the darkness consumed him, Lucas knew that Black Rock would never be the same again. The curse had claimed him, and now the town would fall into shadow once more. A deserted country road winds through dense fog. Tall trees loom overhead. A single car headlights cut through the darkness. Inside the car, Jason Harper driving and Emily Harper sitting in the passenger seat. Jason, are you sure this is the right place? The realtor said it's just down this road. The house is supposed to be abandoned for years, perfect for renovations. The car rounds a bend and suddenly the silhouette of an old decaying mansion emerges from the fog. Its windows are dark, some broken vines crawling up the walls. Jason parks the car. They get out. The wind picks up, carrying a faint, whispering voice. Emily shivers. The front door groans as Jason pushes it open. The air inside is cold, stale, and smells faintly of decay. They walk in. Their footsteps echo in the empty halls. Dust swirls around them in the moonlight. A grand staircase leads up to the second floor, its banister warped and rotting. Suddenly, a faint child's laugh echoes from upstairs. Emily freezes. Did you hear that? Emily Enchka Ging. Probably a raccoon or something. They continue, exploring. In the dining room, a long table is covered in cobwebs. Chairs are overturned. A silver candelabra lies on the floor, dented. Jason picks it up and shakes it gently. Then the candelabra flies from his hands across the room, smashing into the wall. Jason and Emily stumble back, horrified. A loud creaking sound comes from the staircase. Both look up. A dark shadow moves across the top landing. It disappears. Emily gasps. Dort. Emily unwraps a blanket, trying to warm herself. A sudden knock comes from the window. Both freeze. Who's there? Who's there? Emily startled. Jason slowly approaches the window. Nothing is outside. He sighs in relief. The knock comes again, louder this time. A faint, distorted child's voice whispers, "Go away." Emily clutches Jason's arm. The temperature in the room drops dramatically. Their breath becomes visible. Suddenly, the lights from their flashlights flicker. Shadows stretch unnaturally along the walls. A cold, unseen hand brushes Emily's shoulder. She screams. Jason grabs a nearby chair, swinging it wildly, but hits nothing. The room is empty, yet the presence is undeniable. A low, guttural whisper fills the room. You shouldn't have come. Jason and Emily huddle together, terrified as the first real night of horror begins in Willow Creek. Jason and Emily are huddled on the floor, clutching each other. The cold in the room is unbearable. Their breaths come in short gasps. Shadows twist unnaturally across the walls. Jason grabs his phone, trying to call for help. No signal. He tries again. Still nothing. A soft, dragging sound comes from the hallway outside the room. Something is moving. A door at the end of the hallway creaks open slowly on its own. Emily hides her face in Jason's chest. The room grows darker, as if a shadow is spreading. A low, almost human-like moan echoes from the corridor. I want to leave. I want to go home, Emily crying softly. Jason slowly stands, trying to look brave. He grabs a candle from a dresser and lights it. The flame flickers violently, then steadies. He steps into the hallway. The floorboards groan under his weight. Cold wind brushes past him. He shines the candle down the hall. A small, pale hand suddenly reaches out from under the staircase, grabbing at him. Jason stumbles back, screaming. Jason! Emily screaming. The hand disappears as quickly as it appeared. Silence falls. But now, faint whispers are all around them, echoing from the walls and ceiling. Whispers overlapping. Leave. Now. Go. The next morning, the rain has stopped, leaving a damp, foggy landscape outside. Jason and Emily are examining the house by daylight, the horrors of the night before fresh in their minds. They find a small library, dusty and full of cobwebs. Emily opens a large book, flipping through pages of old newspaper clippings. Jason, look at this. Clippings show a series of mysterious deaths and disappearances in the mansion, all involving children. One article catches their attention. A woman named Madeline Thorne was accused of witchcraft and killed on the property in the 1800s. A sudden loud bang upstairs makes them both jump. A chair slides across the floor on its own. The air grows icy again. Jason grabs Emily's hand. We need help. Someone who understands this. Jason finds an old working landline in the study room. He dials frantically. The line clicks. Then a calm, confident voice answers. This is Dr. Marcus Vale. How may I help you? My name is Jason Harper. We moved into a mansion in Willow Creek. Something's wrong. There's a spirit here. It attacked us last night. Take a deep breath. Describe the events from the beginning. Jason recounts everything. The whispers, the shadows, the hand under the stairs, the dragging sounds, and the chilling presence. Emily adds the newspaper clippings about Madeline Thorne. Jason hangs up, glancing at Emily, both knowing that tonight will be even worse than before. The rain has returned, light at first, then heavier. Fog swirls across the lawn. Jason and Emily stand at the edge of the driveway, nervously awaiting Dr. Marcus Vale and his team. A sleek black SUV appears through the mist. 3 figures step out. Dr. Marcus Vale, a calm, experienced paranormal investigator. Sister Helena, a medium with deep spiritual insight. And Liam, a tech specialist with a knack for detecting anomalies. Are you ready? Once we enter, there's no turning back until we've dealt with her. I don't know if I can. Emily trembling. They all enter the mansion. The doors creak ominously, echoing through the dark hallways. The team sets up equipment, EVP recorders, EMF detectors, cameras, and candles. Dr. Vale explains the plan. Madeline Thorne is strong. She feeds off fear. She reacts to sudden movements, loud sounds, and non-vegetarian food. Her anger stems from betrayal and her violent death. Tonight, we'll attempt to communicate, then bind her spirit. Jason and Emily sit in the corner, holding each other. A faint whisper floats through the room, too soft to catch clearly. A sudden slamming sound upstairs causes Liam to drop his camera. Dr. Vale moves toward the staircase. He ascends, candle in hand. The shadows seem to stretch along the walls, forming twisted shapes. A chilling, high-pitched laugh echoes down the staircase. Dr. Vale carefully approaches a closed door at the end of the hallway. The temperature drops sharply. His breath becomes visible. Madeline Thorne, we are here to help you move on. The door slams open violently on its own. A shadowy figure appears. A pale woman in a tattered dress, her eyes black voids. Long black hair obscures most of her face. She floats a few inches above the floor, moving unnaturally. Madeline Thorne, your anger belongs to the past. You will not harm them. The ghost screams, a high-pitched wail that shakes the walls. Furniture slides across the floor. Candles extinguish themselves one by one. Liam shouts, trying to record everything. Sister Helena steps forward, holding a small pendant glowing faintly. By the light of the old, by the power of the unseen, I call you to listen. The ghost pauses, tilts her head. A whisper emerges, almost human. Why did they betray me? Ghost whispering. Suddenly, a loud crash is heard from downstairs. Jason and Emily run toward the sound. They see furniture thrown across the room. A shadow moves across the ceiling, then lands in front of them. It's Madeline Thorne, Emily screaming. The ghost lunges at Jason. He is thrown across the room. Emily tries to grab him, but the ghost grabs her too. Both are lifted off the ground by an invisible force. Dr. Vale runs to the center of the room, holding a small silver cross and chanting an incantation. The ghost lets out a chilling scream. Leave or die, ghost screaming. Jason manages to grab a piece of broken furniture, swinging it at the ghost. It passes through her like smoke, but slows her down. Dr. Val's shouting grows louder. Sister Helena joins in, the pendant glowing brighter. The ghost starts to dissipate slowly, her wail fading. The air warms. The objects stop moving. Jason and Emily collapse to the floor, exhausted but alive. Dr. Vale's serious to Emily and Jason. This is only the beginning. Spirits like Madeline Thorne, they are powerful. But tonight, she has been weakened. The camera lingers on the shadowy corners of the room, hinting that she may not be gone entirely. Jason and Emily sit as Sister Helena performs a vision ritual. Candles circle them. Incense smoke curls around their faces. Suddenly, the room shifts. The walls seem to bleed. Her fury is born of betrayal, starvation, and murder. They left me. They left me. Ghost whispering. Objects fly. Lights flicker. Shadows dart across hallways. Jason and Emily are trapped in a room, terrified. She's feeding off your fear. Stay calm. Dr. Vale shouting. Jason sees ghostly children in the corner, echoes of Madeline's lost family. One reaches toward him, whispering, "Join us." He panics, but Sister Helena intervenes with her pendant, driving the spirits back. Dr. Vale and Sister Helena lure Madeline into the attic. Candles, protective symbols, and chanting surround her. "You can't take me," Ghost screaming. Emily, summoned by Sister Helena, repeats her mother's name to calm Madeline, connecting to the part of her soul still human. "Madeline, it's time to rest. You don't have to hurt anymore." The ghost shrieks, convulses, then suddenly falls silent, hovering briefly before dissipating into mist. The attic is still. The storm outside breaks into light rain. The mansion is quiet. Broken furniture remains, but the oppressive darkness is gone. Jason and Emily sit, exhausted but alive. It's over. She's gone. For now. Spirits like her leave traces. Respect the house. Don't return alone. Sister Helena. Madeline Thorne's story is a warning. Not all spirits want revenge. Some just want closure. The team leaves, the mansion looming quietly in the early morning fog. The camera lingers on a corner of the attic. Faint black smoke curls, hinting she may not be completely gone. Jason and Emily walk away, holding hands. Birds chirp. Life seems to return to normal, but a faint wind carries a whisper. "I'll be waiting," Ghost whispering. Cut to black. The credits roll, leaving a lingering sense of unease. I never expected a single swipe to rearrange the bones of my life. At 23, I was barely holding things together. Part-time shifts at a late-night deli, lectures I sometimes slept through, rent that felt like a fist around my throat. My parents were a memory of arguments and silence. My sister had moved overseas. I had a tiny room above a bakery in Newtown and a roommate, Zoe, who flirted with danger like it was a hobby. When my roommate Zoe joked one night, "Just get a sugar daddy, Ivy. Half the girls I know already do." I laughed, but later, lying in bed scrolling through Tinder, I couldn't ignore how easy the idea sounded. I laughed then, the kind of laugh that never reached my eyes. Still, alone in bed, I scrolled through profiles until a message popped up from Victor Hawthorne. He was 50, he said, but the photos were of a man who might have aged on set. Tailored coats, a silver widow's peak, and eyes that were far too precise. His bio, collector of rare things, looking for a companion who understands beauty. His message appeared a heartbeat after I swiped yes. "Hello, Ivy. Your photo of an honesty I rarely see. Would you allow me to show you dinner?" He wrote like someone who expected the world to fall into place. I told myself it was harmless. I needed the money. I wanted to feel wanted. The restaurant was one I'd only read about in columnists' feeds. Chandeliers, linen that smelled of strangers' wealth. Victor stood as I entered with a movement so practiced it could have been choreographed. He kissed my hand with an old-fashioned courtesy and ordered a bottle I couldn't have named. He listened. He spoke about art, the way other people spoke about weather, with certainty and an impatience that made him sound important. When I fumbled a joke about my student loans, He reached across and set a thin envelope between us. "For a month's rent," he said. "Come to the gallery Saturday. There's something you should see." The envelope had more money than I'd seen in the past 3 months. It felt like oxygen. Victor didn't pressure me for anything sexual. He called himself a patron. He invited me to his townhouse in Paddington, which smelled of old paper and citrus. He taught me how to taste wine as if I'd been born with the wrong tongue, took me to auction previews, and kept me in a net of compliments so fine I hardly noticed when they tightened. "Have you ever wanted to be preserved?" he asked once, idly, while I leaned over his library's balcony. The city below spread like a map. "I don't know what you mean," I said. "To hold something in the moment," he said, almost smiling. "To keep it from decay. There are graceful ways to keep beauty untouched." His words made me laugh in a way that was too small. There was a coldness there, a habit of looking at people as objects to be curated. Still, I stayed because it was easier than leaving. Over the weeks, I watched him move through the city like someone with keys to rooms no one else knew. He introduced me to younger women who hung on his sentences with hungry politeness. Once I saw one of them, Maya, standing by a sculpture in an off-site exhibition, her hands trembling around a glass of water. She was 19 and looked like she'd swallowed a storm. After that, I sated on Maya. I told myself I was protective. I told myself I was jealous. Victor only smiled when I mentioned her. "She's fragile," he said. "She needs someone careful." One evening, he invited me to a small gathering at the townhouse. Zoe had gone out of town, and I almost declined. But the money, the easy warmth of being chosen, won. The other guest was Maya. She smiled at me with lips that didn't reach her eyes. The party was quiet, the three of us sliding between conversation that was polite and pitched. Victor suggested a tour of his private rooms, a part of the house he kept locked for collectors. The basement, he called it, where old things were kept in air that smelled like cedar and winter. When we reached the door, the mood changed. The light was flat. Maya was pale, and for the first time, I noticed that she flinched at his touch. "I want to show you what preservation looks like," Victor said, gentle as a teacher. "You'll understand." I blinked, confused, and then he stabbed Maya. Her scream was muffled as his hand clamped over her mouth. Blood sprayed against the polished floor. My body froze, my lungs locked. When she didn't stir, panic carved a tunnel through me. Victor's face went unreadable. He said quietly that accidents happened and that we needed to handle it so the police didn't turn the house inside out for months. He spoke as if he were arranging flowers. I wanted to run, to scream, but my legs betrayed me. Instead, I helped. I don't remember why. Maybe fear, maybe shock, maybe his control over me was stronger than I ever admitted. I helped him drag Eva body, helped clean the blood. Afterwards, Victor poured me wine and sat across the table with an expression like a verdict. "You understand why I do this?" he asked. "To keep things pristine, to free them from vulgar endings." 2 nights later, the police came. Someone in the building had heard screaming, or maybe seen us with a door shut too tightly. I never learned who. I remember the bright uniforms, the questions, my voice quavering when they asked where I'd been that night. Victor spoke smoothly, with names and alibis and the practiced ease of a man who had rehearsed an explanation. He looked at me once in court, a small, almost tender glance, and it felt like being felled. Newspapers made a monument of the story. Victor Hawthorne, collector, charged with manslaughter. Maya, the missing student. They called me a companion to a suspect, a witness, a person who might have more to say. The cameras looked through me as if I were glass to be tested. At the trial, I learned to speak in short sentences. At night, I learned to listen for my own footfalls in the apartment, to catalogue the times I had been led and the times I had consented. Victor's lawyers painted him as eccentric, a man fascinated by mortality. His eyes, when he glanced at me across the courtroom, said something different: ownership, amusement, and an inch of threat. After the verdict, after the press left, and the house was sealed for evidence, I found myself sitting on the curb outside the building, watching strangers pass. Everyone assumed I was damaged in ways I could not fully explain. Sometimes I think I was. Sometimes I think I was merely tired. Sometimes I still open the message that started it, the casual, elegant request to meet, and the words look like an invitation written in a language I did not understand. "Would you allow me to show you dinner?" they say, and I try to tell myself the truth, that I'd been hungry for much longer than one night could fix, and that hunger makes people do things they don't recognize later. I don't know if I was his victim or his accomplice. I only know what the nights taught me, how easily terror could be folded into civility, how a polished hand can press the sharpest things into your palm while you count your blessings. The choice, in the end, felt like a paper I'd signed without opening. And in quieter moments, when rain makes the pavement shine like a gallery floor, I still feel the memory of his voice telling me why he believed he was right, and the small, unbearable twist when someone you let look after you decides you are an object he will keep, whether you agree or not.
Two years ago, I moved to Texas with my best friend and roommate, Sarah. We rented a small, cozy apartment on the outskirts of town. I've always had a fascination with dolls, not the plastic kind, but those beautiful porcelain antiques. To me, they weren't creepy, they were comforting. So, on my birthday, when Sarah handed me a delicately wrapped box, I was thrilled. Inside was the most stunning doll I had ever seen. Her skin was pale porcelain, smooth except for a faint hairline crack under her right eye. She had cascading auburn curls and the most hauntingly vivid blue eyes I'd ever seen, eyes that glistened like glass but somehow felt alive. I was in awe. "I saw her in an antique shop and immediately thought of you," Sarah smiled. I named her Hazel. She took her place of honor on my nightstand, facing my bed. At night, her eyes reflected the soft light of my lamp. They sparkled, almost too much. In the beginning, everything felt fine. Hazel added charm to my room, and I found her presence oddly comforting. But that comfort began to sour within a week. It started small. My phone charger would be unplugged in the morning. A spoon I knew I had placed in the sink would be back on the counter. I blamed Sarah at first, thinking she was playing pranks, but she swore she wasn't. Then came the whispers. At night, just as I was drifting to sleep, I'd hear faint murmurs. Soft, female, like a lullaby sung through clenched teeth. I'd sit up, heart pounding, but the room would be silent except for Hazel's eyes, reflecting moonlight, staring directly at me. I told myself it was stress, a trick of the ears, but the feeling of being watched grew stronger, heavier. I couldn't shake it. It followed me from room to room, especially when Hazel was nearby. One night I awoke with a start, my arm stinging. When I turned on the light, there were 3 long, thin scratches running down my forearm. I checked the sheets, my nails, even under the bed. Nothing. But Hazel, who normally sat upright, had slumped forward, her face turned toward me, mouth slightly agape. The next morning, I found strange symbols drawn in soot on the mirror. Circles within circles, lines like thorns twisting into runes. I wiped them away quickly, refusing to acknowledge the fear spreading in my chest. That day, I went to see Father Thomas at the small Catholic church down the road, a kind, older man with tired eyes. When I explained what was happening, he grew silent. "Camila," he said gravely, "some objects carry spiritual residue, negative energy. They can become vessels, homes for things that should not walk this world." He offered to cleanse the apartment and banish whatever was attached to the doll, but I couldn't do it. I couldn't give up Hazel. She was a gift from Sarah, a symbol of our bond. So I politely declined. That night, the whispers returned, louder, clearer. I heard my name spoken with a breath that wasn't mine. "Kama, help me." I froze. My entire body went numb. Hazel sat in her usual place, but her head had turned slightly. I was sure of it. Her eyes gleamed unnaturally in the dark. Still, I didn't scream. I didn't run. Instead, I replied, "What do you want?" There was no answer, but something shifted. The air grew colder. My breath fogged up. Hazel's eyes seemed to soften for a moment. I told myself I was imagining it, but deep down I knew I wasn't. From then on, I began speaking to her. Every night, whispered conversations in the dark. I told her about my fears, my childhood, my dreams. I shared things I had never even told Sarah. In return, Hazel never moved, never answered again. But she listened. I could feel it, and I felt connected. But the deeper our connection grew, the darker the apartment became. The lights flickered constantly. Cold spots would appear in corners. Sarah started having nightmares, screaming in her sleep. Once, she woke up with a nosebleed and a bruise in the shape of a small handprint on her thigh. She asked me to move Hazel into the closet. I refused. We argued. Then one morning I found Hazel sitting on Sarah's pillow. Neither of us had put her there. That day, Sarah packed a bag and left to stay with her sister. She never came back. Left alone, I sank deeper into Hazel's world. The symbols reappeared, carved into the wooden floor this time. The walls began bleeding, ever so faintly, around the baseboards. Not red, something darker, black, like oil. At night, I'd hear footsteps circling my bed. My reflection in the mirror would sometimes smile when I didn't. My fingernails turned brittle. My skin grew pale. I barely slept. And still, I couldn't part with her. Then came the night I truly lost control. I was lying in bed, eyes closed, when something crawled onto my chest. I opened my eyes, but saw nothing. I couldn't move. It was like being pinned down by invisible hands. My chest burned, my vision blurred, and then I heard Hazel again. But this time her voice was not soft. It was desperate, screeching. "Kama, don't leave me!" I screamed. My body jerked free. I lunged for the door, but it slammed shut. The windows rattled. Hazel had fallen off the table and lay face up on the floor, smiling. Blood dripped from her porcelain lips. That was the moment I finally broke. The next day, I called Father Thomas. I begged him to come. This time, he brought help. 3 people in dark robes, carrying candles and vials of holy water. They set up quickly, chanting as they surrounded Hazel. The moment they began, the room changed. The temperature plummeted. The windows shattered. The floor shook. Hazel shrieked, a high-pitched sound that came from nowhere and everywhere. Her mouth opened wider than it should have, revealing a cavern of black. Father Thomas shouted ancient prayers. One of the robed women collapsed, blood pouring from her nose. The lights exploded, but still they continued. The chanting rose to a fever pitch and then silence. Hazel's body cracked, a line running straight down her face. Her eyes rolled back, and then stillness. She was gone. They sealed Hazel in a glass case. wrapped in silk with runes burned into the fabric. She was taken to a private museum that specialized in cursed objects, a place far from here, far from me. I watched them carry her away, and I wept, not from fear, but from something else, grief. Even now, months later, I can't explain it. Was Hazel truly evil? Or was she just misunderstood? A spirit reaching out, confused, lonely, clinging to the only person who ever listened. My room is empty now. Peaceful, yes, but sterile. Cold, quiet. Too quiet. And sometimes, just as I'm falling asleep, I swear I hear it again. A whisper. Come on. And I wonder, did I really save myself? Or did I abandon her?